Welcome to the World of Martial Arts podcast. I'm here with my co-hosts Kurt and Mick, and we're about a week past the Jake Paul versus Ben Askren fight, which happened in Atlanta on the 17th of April. It finished pretty quickly, with Jake Paul winning by KO in about, I think it was 1 minute 59, like very, very quick. Did you guys see the fights? What did you think to that particular match?
Mick, take it away.
2 minutes, couldn't call it a match. What I did actually like was I liked how, well, I've had to totally change the way that I look at Ben Askren, because I thought he was an absolute douchebag, but he played a blinder. He rocked up, took his shirt off, total dad bod, hadn't done any training whatsoever, started proper wrestle heel shit where he was coming out with like, one day all men will look like this, you know, this is what the epitome of an athlete looks like right now. And you're looking at it and you're going, this guy has turned up for the $500,000 payday or whatever it was that he got. All I do know is the same weekend, what he got for losing in 2 minutes, the main eventers at the UFC didn't get combined. So that, first of all, gives you an idea of, yeah, where we can go with this whole thing. The fight was ridiculous. It wasn't really a fight at all. The one thing you got to give Jake Paul his due is he's like, you guys are a lot younger than me, but I'm an old fart. I had absolutely no idea that the reach, as they say, that these influencers have. Like, it literally is like, swear to God, it is like they're, you know, looking behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz. And you're like, so these guys can sell 2 minutes of banal and awful fighting. A great build-up, don't get me wrong. The build-up was amazing. It's like watching a soap opera. But the fight itself was ridiculous. Askren didn't even try. Jake Paul didn't look that good. He dropped to his knees. Like, he literally, I thought it was Rocky VI when he dropped to his knees after winning it. And then obviously, fair play, he dedicated to his bodyguard who passed away and everything. And I don't really think the kid's an absolute douchebag. Maybe he is, I don't know. But what I do know is, for somebody who doesn't really have much talent, but just has applied himself, which is probably the most martial arts thing about it all, is didn't have much talent, but applied himself. And guess what? Payday. So all I know is, I do believe that combat sports is finished now. We are a new era of combat sports, because it is literally, the lines are blurred between sports entertainment and what fighting is now. So there you are, guys. I'm sorry, but one of you guys is going to have to jump in now, because I don't give a gap ever, as you know.
There was no gaps there. So you mentioned... Go on, go.
I'd like to put a pin in the, like, to circle back to what you were just starting to get into there, which is what the hell is happening with combat sports today. But what my response to this whole fight really was going to be to ask you a question, Nathan, and Mick, you already just brought it up. Because Nathan, you've talked in the past, or you've referenced like the reach and the numbers for fights, right? And you'll talk, I think, especially when we talk about celebrity boxing in the past and about these are two guys, right? Two brothers.
Yeah, Jake and Logan.
There's two of them. Okay, because one of them's going to fight Mayweather.
Yes, the other brother, Logan's going to fight Mayweather.
The one who I think looks maybe less athletic, which is surprising to me, because I don't know one from the other much about him. But you always point out very well that a lot of this comes down to dollars and cents, and I'm always looking at it as a fan and as a nerd, right? And I don't have much experience or exposure to the back end of these things. There's a joke there. I was wondering if you have,
as a nerd, you know, boxing history. So boxing history has not exactly always been
sure
legitimate champions.
Right, exactly. Sure. That's a good point. But I was wondering if, for context, if you and Mick, if you guys could provide maybe some details that you know about, as far as like I just don't understand why they would want to continue. Why Mayweather? I know he doesn't mind fighting for a paycheck. I mean, he's an incredibly paid athlete throughout history, but why boxing as a whole? Mick, you've pointed out that the main event combined didn't have the same amount of money as this match, and I cannot wrap my head around that. I don't understand that, and I was wondering if either of you can shed light on how the hell that happens.
I don't think that's actually true, but it depends. It really depends on what Jake got paid. So Jake's base pay, according to the Athletic Commission, was $690,000. Now, so that's just his wage for just turning up and doing the fight. Now, what it comes down to is what he got from the pay-per-views, and I have no idea, and no one knows. Now, he's claiming 65 million, which is absolutely outrageous, and I don't believe for a second that's how much he made from it. Not even close. Now, it had 1.3 million pay-per-view buys, which is probably similar to the UFC. But I know, I mean, the thing is that Usman made quite a bit. Usman made about 1.3 million from his fight. I think the Rose got 310,000. So, you know, like it really depends on what Jake actually made, and we don't know.
Well, if you don't mind, I think that I'm quite remiss here. I should have spelled this out. I'm not talking about the. By the way, if you haven't watched the Rose Usman card, best card in MMA ever, personally, that I think, right? I'm actually talking about the week of the Jake Paul fight where Bobby Knuckles fought. So Whittaker fought. If you put, I can't remember who he fought now. No, that's really got me. But that was the same. That was the MMA. That was the UFC on at the same night. And Robert Whittaker didn't make the Askren made more money than the two guys in the main event for that UFC card. So I'm not talking about the Usman fight. The Usman fight, if those guys are actually starting to get paid money now. Rose is starting to get paid proper money. But to give you an idea of when you were saying, Kurt, why is he doing it? I would think with Mayweather's just smart. He realizes this is the future. Like, you know, if you look at Netflix and Amazon Prime and Apple TV, who would have thought that they would have taken over from like Warner Brothers and MGM? You know what I mean? So this is the thing. It's like the first thing after Jake Paul won that fight, Snoop Doggy Dogg. Bear in mind, there was a guy from Saved from the Bell, right? Saved by the Bell. He was like, you know, Mario Lopez. Yeah. He was in there, right? So it was all these B-list celebrities, right? It was Gastelum, Kelvin Gastelum, right? But the first thing Snoop Doggy Dogg started shouting was, Dana White, where's my mofo in money? Where's my mofo? And what he'd done was he'd done a bet for $1 million straight, win or lose. Jake Paul was going to knock him out. And, you know, that's where it all is. Like, it's a mad setup now. It's like, because we're all in on this. I just noticed something. I'm going to hand over to Nathan in a minute, but I just saw two friends of mine talking on Facebook with each other about being part owners of the UFC. And they were like, well, technically I'm a part owner of the UFC now because it's been floated and they've bought shares in it, and they go, come and see me for matchups. And immediately I'm looking at it and I'm going, shit, have I missed the boat here? I should be buying some shares in the UFC. But it literally is. It's like, Kurt, I know you're like this because you're a bit of an Italian character. It's a bit of an old, this thing of ours sort of Sicilian number, right? Where it, you know, it literally is now. We're into a different era now where people are personally invested in fights, regardless of if it's MMA, celebrity boxing. Ironically, the one thing that people aren't getting into is legitimate boxing. Because legitimate boxing is literally, I'm looking at it from the outside going, no, well, we're going to stick with this because we're not going to sell out. And you're like, but guys, you're not really selling out. You're losing out. You could be making a shitload of money here. Frank Warren will be in there in a heartbeat as soon as he realizes, because they're the biggest goon bars of all. Boxing, like, you actually think Don King wouldn't be in the middle of all of this? Like, Don King's raging right now that he isn't in part of this. You know what I mean? Nathan, what's your views on this?
Well, it's weird. Like, you mentioned what legitimate boxing mean. Okay, so in many ways, what is legitimate boxing? Because I mentioned, well, you mentioned Italian, Primo Camera.
Okay, sorry.
Do you remember? He was a guy who had size 8 feet, but was a giant. So he used to wear these big clown feet because he didn't want people to realize he had small feet. Primo Camera, but like, again, he was everything that was. Nathan, we're going back to the great days of almost carnival boxing, where you had Tuta and Tony Galento turning up to fight, you know, and smoking a cigar halfway through.
Yeah, but
What
like,
were you saying about him, Nathan? I'm sorry for
oh
interrupting.
yeah, so like in many ways, like so Primo was kind of like a mob champion. You know, he was put there by the mob. A lot of his fights were fixed. So that's, you wouldn't say that's really, is that legitimate? And that was a heavyweight champion in the world. And then also you look at guys coming up, and you know any boxer who's going to be even a slight prospect, he's going to get given bum after bum after bum after bum after bum. They're going to get given experience. They're going to get, how many times have we seen these guys come up who look half decent and they're just beating nobodies in the first round, not getting much experience in? Well, if Jake Paul was a prospect, he'd be getting easy fights as well. And yeah, he fought someone, in Ben Askren who has fought before. Yeah, okay, it's an overweight, retired, post-hip surgery wrestler. But you would be seeing, an up-and-coming pro fighting people that they were beating in the first round. They just wouldn't be getting paid millions and put on the top of the bill. But then if he's actually selling 1.3 million pay-per-views, if that's true, then he should be top of the bill. Because that's what someone would do in the UFC, a champion would do in the UFC. So it's a hard one to say what's legitimate, because people would be put in these situations, fake champions, easy fights. This is part of boxing. And anyone who could sell tickets would be put at the top of a card. I mean, we've seen that in MMA, I'm sure, plenty of times. The guy who can sell all the tickets is given the top. Personally, yeah, obviously, I'm not a massive fan. I think people do underestimate him a little bit. He had an MMA match with AJ. I don't know if you saw it. Jake Paul did. Yeah. And the thing is, yeah, okay, he gets schooled. But the moment AJ shoots on Jake Paul and he resists a bit, you see how ridiculously strong he is. Like he's clearly an incredibly strong, athletic young guy. And I think people do underestimate how much of it basically just a jock athlete he is. Yeah, not a great boxer. He took out someone in a couple of minutes who's got the worst striking in MMA history. The guy just took a payday. But I don't think part of it hurts to say it, but what is legitimate boxing? Is it any less legitimate than some of the crap I've seen in the ring before, where people have been given easy fights? I don't know.
Today is a weird day because you just kind of made me a believer in this. That is not what I anticipated. But honestly, I'm so glad that I asked. This is kind of the information and the context I was wanting to get, is to wrap my head around. First of all, my big blank spot is that I always just flat out forget about pay-per-view numbers, as stupid as that sounds. But that's kind of what I mean about being like the martial art nerd or the boxing nerd about it, is I'm just focused on like, oh, these two styles of boxers matching up, and forget that there's this massive enterprise around it. So that all makes sense. Of course, the pay-per-view numbers for what, Mick, it seems like you're describing as being this personality driven thing now. You know what I mean? Like that's the way of the future. And even, I don't know, Netflix itself has a different kind of personality, a different kind of vibe around it than Blockbuster did and everything before it. So that actually makes sense. And you're right. Anybody coming up, if they're going to be somebody, they're probably going to get fed a bunch of tomato cans, right? They're just going to be fed just a bunch of goofballs or some guys that are maybe legitimate, but
I've seen guys like that who can sell 200 tickets to a show,
right?
And they get given like the guy who's not even from a gym, is an independent, and he beats him. And that's a guy who can sell a couple of hundred tickets max, maybe even sell 100 tickets.
Yeah,
we're talking about a guy who's selling over 1 million pay-per-views.
Yeah, it's what it would be here. It'd be like some guy who sold a bunch of tickets to all of his cousins, and then me going in there and him just beating the hell out of me and being like, "Hey, like that's it." Well, if we both could generate millions of dollars in the process, good God, why wouldn't we? Because if he's really trying to get after it, then that's kind of cool. I don't assume that Jake is really trying to do this legitimately, because otherwise he'd be going through the legitimate channel. But the idea that, well, what the hell, if you can make $1 million or millions of dollars in the process, why wouldn't you? That makes sense. It leaves me seeing, I think, is a little bit as what you're saying, Nathan. It leaves me a little disappointed, or it leaves that bad taste in my mouth, because it always bothers me that there's all these other young guys who don't have a choice. That's the only process they have available to them. The only thing, if they have access at all, is that, coming from the bottom up thing. And because it looks insanely strong, he's in great shape, but because he's, some YouTube athlete or whatever, he gets to start at the top. We've got one of these two fighting Mayweather now. That's as high as you can start.
Well, you see, this is crazy thing. My son Max was telling me Jake Paul has a hit list of people that he wants to fight, and Conor McGregor is one of them. And you're like, the crazy thing, as we're talking,
he just wants to get close to him. I don't buy it.
Maybe, yeah, but you see what you got to remember.
Get close to that money. That's what it is.
Yeah. That's this is what it all boils down to now, guys. This is just yet another era of boxing, of combat sports. Ironically, or quite, it's quite telling that it's the literal, I think, the epitome of they say it in professional wrestling. It's the one thing that breaking kayfabe, but if you don't know what that is, Google it, right? But breaking kayfabe is a huge thing. But going into business for yourself in the ring was like the worst thing you could ever do. So it's that whole beating the shit out of a guy legitimately in front of a load of people where you built this narrative behind it that this guy can't get you. Yeah. So now what you've got these guys who are going into business for themselves. And I think it's the logical conclusion of, athletes taking control of themselves, because the only people that seem to be pissed off about it are promoters. Because, Jake Paul, who does he need behind him? I don't know who promotes him. I think Jake Paul promotes Jake Paul. I think Conor McGregor promotes. I remember Conor McGregor. I remember this. Literally, it was like, it was that realization, where Neo's like, there is no spoon in the Matrix. Yeah. Conor McGregor was live streaming himself going up and down the strip in Vegas with Dana White. Dana White had literally said, kid, this is all going to be yours. This is going to be yours. And he's doing this Facebook live thing or YouTube thing. And you can see Conor, because he just glint in his eye going, why do I need you now? And it's that moment where it's like, I don't need you. But and like, this is like, we're living proof of this now. We are 4 different personalities on screen right now, brought connected, and we can throw this out in 6 hours? And the information's out there, it's edited, right. It's done. So you don't need to go through anyone now. And that's what this whole boxing thing is now. I think this is combat sports.
I go through anyone, you mean like the systems and everything that are in place?
Yeah, all of that is done,
system.
Man.
Right.
All of that is that, like, oh, well, we need to speak to the promoter. We've all been there. We've all had to deal with some level of bureaucracy in the past to get anything done. You know what it's like. They think you want to get change of use for your gym, right? How many times do you have to go through it? And they go, but why? Why don't I just go boom and do this? And now these guys are proving it, because Jake Paul's like, yeah, okay, like, who's Jake Paul going to fight next? The Winter Soldier? You know what I mean? I'd watch that. You know what I mean?
It's interesting what you say when you brought up professional wrestling. Maybe these shows are, well, considering it's like Snoop Dogg doing commentary and it's tied to an app and all that kind of stuff, maybe it's more close to pro wrestling than it is to boxing. I don't know. Like, it seems to have like the storylines and all that kind of stuff more so than their actual sporting history. So I don't know. Maybe it is closer to that. It's
like the birth of a new format.
Possibly a little bit. I mean, it's weird. It always stuck with me. About 5 years ago, I was in a doctor's office and there was a magazine. You pick one of those magazines up and you flick through it, and there was an image, and on the front it had Donald Trump, Conor McGregor, Kanye West, I think it probably had Logan Paul or something like that, all these people, and I can't remember the exact title, but it was basically, it's the era of the dickhead, right? It was like, it's like we're in the era of the brash person who makes loads of claims, can't back it up, it just talks about themselves, talks about money, talks about this, and it was like, oh, we're in the era of that. I'm not sure we've never not been in the era of that, but with like Mick said, the chance of self-promoting yourself now, you can go straight in. There's no gatekeepers to go to, like, the mainstream media. You can just put stuff out, which is exactly what the Logan Paul and his brother have done. They've gone straight to the source, gone straight out, got their own audience. They don't need people to kind of stop them. I mean, I think some of these people would have been kept away from TV, would have been kept away from stuff but now they can just, I mean, again, with Trump as well, I guess with Twitter and things like that, some of these people can just get an audience directly, and whether we like it or not, some people do seem to like it. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, the idea of this thing being personality driven, then that's just like you were saying with Netflix, Mick, I'm going to keep kind of coming back to that in my head. That's where we see everything going now, is personality driven. Even story writing for television has changed and improved because you have so many of these, you know, whether it's The Wire or Game of Thrones, or, you know, the first one that I saw that was like this was Sons of Anarchy, where they're very character driven. And you're like, this is a different kind of show writing, right? So many things where we're used to seeing, whether it's Mick Tully, we're used to seeing people on social media where we're following people. We're not necessarily following your business, Mick. Like I will follow your business, and I do, and I'm always impressed by the videos. There's something cathartic to watching them. You're a talented dude, but that's not the thing that we're engaging with. We're engaging with Mick, and that's what we're seeing, I guess, echo in every other thing. I was saying in the middle of the quarantine, it hit me. We're going to hit a point where we just start subscribing to people. Cutting out that network or that structure means we no longer would need Instagram, Facebook, or whatever. We just have a platform where I'm just paying to subscribe to Mick because this is everything.
Someone's literally doing that right now,
so,
and it's there's Dogecoin, which seems to be a little bit of a it's a weird thing in the crypto world right now. There's a website, Dogecoin, where you're creating profiles for famous people, and then you like buy coin, and then kind of like subscribe to each person as saying, "Oh, I give a little bit to them," because. But the thing is, obviously, they're actually stealing people's profiles. They'll put Elon Musk on there, but Elon Musk not got actually anything to do with it.
Well, and Patreon is playing in that space. Hell, OnlyFans is playing in that space. You know what I mean? There's people on there that are doing like straight lace work and not just like 18 and over content, which I can't imagine why you would do that. But you know, all these different sites, that's the point. You're subscribing to the individual. And so I guess if you're really into Jake Paul and you literally or figuratively subscribe to that guy as an individual, and then you're going to find out Jake Paul's about to go fight somebody that might be sort of famous. Yeah, you're going to want to watch that because that's what you're into. You're maybe not even into boxing. You're just into watching Jake Paul fight.
You've just hit on something there. It's like, as we were talking, the one phrase that keeps coming to me is that you're emotionally invested.
Yeah, right.
And you really are, because it's almost like I know this is like an episode of Black Mirror level shit that we're getting into here now, but it's that whole thing where it's like, I know people that think that they have a relationship with somebody they see on YouTube.
Sure.
More than they have a relationship with somebody that they know in the real world. And you know, it's like with Jake Paul and Logan Paul, again, like I was doing this stand-up bit, and I'm still working on it now, because I started off with a girl called Jay Goody. She's passed away now, but she was like the first gatekeeper of We Will Celebrate Mediocrity. And then I was watching her and going, but like she can't even speak English. You know, what's going on with this woman? But the problem was, because she appealed to so many other mediocre individuals, they jumped on it. So I've got this theory now that everybody who, like, there's a literally legion of douchebags who dress like Jake Paul, who have that ridiculous haircut like him, those awful tattoos, but they're now like he's like their alpha male. He's like, literally, it's like the church of Jake Paul. And like, you know, unfortunately, this makes me sound like an old fart, but there's way more of them than there are of us. You know what I mean? Because it's like, there's all these mediocre dudes out there. And it's like, why do they watch, you know, Real Housewives of Manhattan, or Real Housewives of Brooklyn, or I don't know, Real Housewives of Mendota Heights in Minneapolis now, I don't know, whatever it's called. But, you know, it's like mediocrity sells. And like, we've seen it, because Jake Paul versus Ben Askren, I've seen better fights outside of the chip shop. Like, that is the truth. But I swear to God, it was compelling to watch. Literally, it was like a car crash. You know, when you're on the motorway or the freeway and you're driving past and go, I really shouldn't look, you go, must look. It was exactly the same thing. All I do know is I don't know if it's a new thing. I think it's just another era of what we're going to have. You know, because if we look at boxing, you can clearly define some of the eras. Like me and Nathan were talking offline about this, like the 80s, when you look at it now, like, have you ever seen any sports go in line so much as Rocky films? So literally, Rocky 1, the guy is beating up like a rack of ribs, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and then 5 years later, he's getting his teeth done. and pardon my French, Ant McGinley, you might have to get this out, right? Because it might demonetize us or whatever. But he's got a motherfucking robot butler. So literally within 3 movies, he's gone from working out at a butcher's to a robot butler. And you're like,
it goes from an American dream underdog story to excess and 80s and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, Gordon Gecko with a pair of gloves. But it's the truth, because it's like the 70s. If we go back and we look at the 70s, very Scorsese like, very Mean Streets. 60s, you know what I mean?
Rocky won the Oscar for a reason. You know what I mean? It's like it's a proper film, and it's completely different. Yeah, when you look at Rocky 4, which starts off with the 2 gloves, the American and the USSR glove, and then the one explodes like that.
Hey, I'll tell you what, guys, if you're watching at home, go back and watch Raging Bull, and I swear to God, you will come out of that like it's like a David Fincher movie. I don't know if you've guys gone back and watched Raging Bull recently, but it's like, tell you, I'm emotionally overwrought when I watch that movie now. It's mad.
So the big thing that I've personally that I learned, like from listening to you guys explain and the back end of this thing and having the discussion about how this thing works, and what's shed a big light on it to me, is I think for me, there's a difference between somebody being a boxer and somebody who's doing boxing. And I'm going to phrase it that way on purpose, because you hear people say, oh, I do boxing now. And they're like, right, okay, that's different than somebody who tells you I'm a boxer, right? The whole thing is different. And I always think that as a martial artist, at what point do I watch it on the mat? Do I watch my students go from being someone who's quote unquote doing martial arts to this is their thing? They're a martial artist now. This is somehow part of them. And I also think oftentimes that transition can be toxic for people. It can be like there's a whole lot of stuff that gets packed into that. But there's a difference. And if Jake Paul is making millions of dollars doing boxing, good for him. That doesn't necessarily mean he's in the same organizations that he's in, he's fighting for the same belts or whatever, because this is its own promotion, isn't it? Right.
Yeah,
and that was something else I hadn't even considered, was that part.
It's tied to an app, and people the spectators won a place on the app. It's some video app called Thriller.
Interesting. Yeah. So yeah, it's completely its own thing that utilizes boxing as part of it, but that's different than calling yourself a boxer, I guess. For me,
I truly do believe that I think this is just a next era. But it's ironic that the promoters won't be part of this. That's Don King, Eddie Hearn, guys like that. Don't need them anymore.
The thing is, it's like if it's tied so much to one personality. The thing is with a promoter, the fight, often, as you know, you've seen promoters treat people just like cattle. They come in, they'll build them up, get rid of them, slaughter them, put someone else in. When it's if someone's promoting their own fights, unless they've got a stable of people themselves to come up behind them that they're building up and maybe using some of their like attention to and shedding it onto them and then building them up, it'll die. When they stop, it'll be dead. So they'll come, those kind of promotions will come and go, and they might just disappear, and then the big ones will come back in and take the space. Who knows? I don't know. What you need is a fighter who's a good legitimate boxer who's doing the whole Jake Paul Conor McGregor thing. Like, that's what it'll be. There'll be another one like that. That's what will happen. And because they'll hit both markets, they'll get both.
Yeah, but the only thing is, it's like Canelo Alvarez, Triple G, or Lomachenko. I don't see anyone else. I'm keeping an eye out because I really want to see the next Matrix guy. But I'm not
interesting though. Yeah, I mean, because those guys are so talented, but there's no self-promotion. Is that why, do you have to sacrifice some talent or something if you're going to put that much mental bandwidth into self-promotion?
Or you have a team who does it for you. I'm guessing a lot of these famous influencers and stuff, there's people doing most of it for them,
That's true.
Without sounding like old farts, you got to remember, a lot of this is still pretty new to us, but we're talking about guys now who've grown up with this shit. That's all they
don't know people who are on TV shows. They don't know, they know people that are YouTubers. That's what it's.
Right. I think that's a really, really, really important point. I think the thing you're saying about the generational difference is specifically what I'm trying to wrap my head around. Everything that you guys just explained to me, the overarching thing is, if my 21-year-old nephew was sitting here right now, he'd be like, what the hell are you on about? What are you even talking about? They're boxing each other. And I'm like, well, that's not boxing. And he's like, they're boxing. So it's boxing. Like, that would be because for me, I'm conceptualizing boxing as this, it has its own universe, its own ethos around it. It has this history. It has this culture. It has these standards. It has these organizations and these famous people and its own Hall of Fame and all this different kind of stuff. And I think if you're 16, if you're 20 right now, things don't look that way. We don't have the same kind of institutions anymore that we used to have, because the internet has made everything so evenly available and distributed, right? So the idea of like going, well, me thinking, how come he gets a shot? He's not even a boxer. And somebody else going, yeah, he is. And he's about to box that guy. Like, well, yeah, but it's different. It's not anymore. You know,
and he can sell more pay-per-views than nearly any other boxer out there. So.
Right, exactly. So it's just, it's there. Everything is kind of enmeshed, right? And again, personality driven in that way. So people aren't going there to watch the art or the sport or the science of boxing. They're going there to watch those two people box. And sometimes with boxing, that's certainly what it is. But I feel like usually it's going to at least include the other part, right? You know, if you're going to watch Canelo fight somebody, it's not because you really like him. It's because you want to watch him do his thing. You know, he's a magician when he's in there, and it's fun to watch that, as opposed to, you know, well, I've been watching this guy since he was young and now he's still on here. And you know, people have a crush on him or something, so they want to go watch him take his shirt off and fight a dude. Maybe that's too personal. You get what I mean.
I don't know. Maybe there is a bit of survivor bias of information that carries on through history. So we look back and you might go, yeah, but like that year there was this great boxing bout with Roberto Duran or something. Yeah, there was probably also 20,000 mismatches. Like, but no one remembers any of those, like, or saw any of those or whatever. Like, the majority of fights were probably crap and mismatches. Like, but you remember the great fights, and you look through history, and that's what you see, and you go, "Oh, that's what boxing is." And I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about it. But well, there's one of the things though, like with you know, I'm a massive film fan. And one of the things I see people reviewing films sometimes, and I see like some guy reviewing a kid's film and saying how terrible it is. And sometimes you got to remember, not everything is for you. Right. Like, and just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not good. You know, I might not want to watch Jake Paul fight, but it's not for me, is it? It's for the people who watch it, go on his YouTube channel. I can have an opinion on that, but it's not designed for me. So why would I like it?
Yeah.
Great point.
Nathan, you hit the nail on the head. It's like when you go back and watch Star Wars as a grown man, especially again, I'm a little bit older than you guys. So I remember VHS being a thing. And I remember how amazing it was to be able to get a film on tape and watch it when you wanted to watch it. And it wasn't the cinema, and it wasn't edited on BBC or ITV with the adverts. And I remember going back and watching it. And I remember, like, Star Wars 1, I was like, hokey. Empire, I was like, fuck, man, this is amazing. Return of the Jedi, I was like, how did I forget about those annoying Ewoks? And it was like, and it's that point where it's like, people started a religion. Oh, I'm a Jedi. And I remember guys saying, I'm a Jedi. Oh, I'm really cool. And then you look back at those movies and go, oh man, it's awful. And it's like Nathan said, it goes, sometimes there is a little bit of survivor bias there. You look back at it, you go, yeah, it's great. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, to summing it up on the old Jake Paul scenario, it's like, it ain't for me, but it must be for someone, because those pay-per-views are numbers, man. Yeah, there's no joking aside there.